Happy Friday, and it's a busy night for the Ontario Hockey League. And I just wanted to do a quick news video talking about a milestone that happened last night and a couple of interesting articles. One involving the Brantford Bulldogs, and then a question that was thrown my way last night. So I wanted to talk about here on a video. Before we get to that, let's start things off in North Bay. The battalion having a player hit a milestone, and of course, it's Anthony Romani. He's been having an amazing run. Last night, he scored his 50th goal of the season, which also happened to be his 100th point of the season. So big congrats going out to Anthony Romani. And you know what? Since the battalion joined the Ontario Hockey League back in 1998, only two other players have ever reached the 50 goal mark. That includes Micah Matteo. He had 50 goals in the 2015-2016 season. And then Justin Brazeau, he had 61 goals in 2018-2019. So Romani joining some pretty elite company there for the battalion organization. And I was looking a little further, and Romani's also just the third player to ever hit 100 points since the battalion relocated to North Bay 10 years ago. Romani, he joins Brandon Coe. He had 101 points in the 2021-22 season. And then, of course, Brazeau, 113 points, and that was in the 18-19 season. So this North Bay team in the past has always been known for their defensive hockey when Stan Butler was the head coach. Since Ryan Ullahan has taken over behind the bench, this team has been a little more offensive friendly, and we're seeing that with the likes of Anthony Romani. Saw it with Brazeau, with Brandon Coe. So this North Bay Battalion team becoming more and more fun to watch, and right now in the thick of it for top spot in the Central Division. At the time of recording right now, Anthony Romani, second in league scoring, 1 point behind David Goyette of the Sudbury Wolves, and they do have 5 games remaining. So that's going to be quite the race to see who can be the top scorer in the Ontario Hockey League, and it's quite fitting that it's two Northern Ontario teams that are having this race between Romani and Goyette. With Romani's stats, though, it's kind of surprising. He hasn't been drafted by an NHL team. He did play bottom 6 minutes last season, so he was playing on that strong North Bay team, so maybe not getting as much attention from the scouts. But this year, you have to figure he's on NHL radar going into the draft this summer. Last year, in 66 games, he had 23 goals and 43 points, which is still pretty respectful. But this year, it's been a monster season. Of course, he's a 2005 born, so he'll likely be back with North Bay next year. Plus, there's the possibility of an overage season. So the sky's the limit for Anthony Romani. Of course, every season is going to be a little bit different. How are the North Bay Battalion going to look next year? Those are questions we'll face in the offseason, but still, he's got quite the talent, and it's been on full display. And he's been on that great line with Dalen Wakely and Owen Van Steensel. They have been outstanding. Of course, Dalen Wakely, another player who's in the top 5 in scoring in the Ontario Hockey League. So those two have been feeding off one another. And this is a team that could take top spot in the Central Division with 5 games remaining. If you look at the last 5 for North Bay, their next 2 games are on the road. They're in Peterborough and Kingston. Then they're home to Barrie. That's going to be on next Wednesday. And then they play in Mississauga before wrapping up the season against the Peterborough Petes. So a pretty favorable schedule for the North Bay Battalion. They've got an inside track right now for top spot in the Central, which would be pretty huge. They won the Central Division last year, and now it looks like they could do it again, back-to-back seasons for them. But then if you look at the other teams they're in a battle with, the Sudbury Wolves, they play the Oshawa Generals tonight. Oshawa, red hot right now in my power rankings. I had them as the number 1 team. For Sudbury, then after that, they go to Barrie and Owen Sound before hosting Niagara, travel to Niagara, and then host Oshawa. So they have 2 games against the Oshawa Generals. So a more challenging schedule than the North Bay Battalion. And then, of course, the Mississauga Steelheads. They only have 4 games remaining, but they're right there in the thick of it as well. They have a home game tonight against the Niagara Ice Dogs before traveling to Brantford and Niagara. Then they host North Bay to finish this season. So that game between North Bay and Mississauga could have big implications in the Central Division race. So it's fascinating, and it's just been a fun ride. I know that at the start of the year, there was a lot of questions. What would the North Bay Battalion do? I did that interview with Ranjan, the play-by-play voice of the North Bay Battalion, and how there's a lot of questions around this team to start the season, but they decided to go all in at the trade deadline. They kept Ty Nelson, Dom DiVincentis, and getting some great play from Anthony Romani. And again, congratulations on reaching the 50 goal milestone and the 100-point mark for this year. And an interesting article I came across today involving the Bulldogs organization, and it was in the Hamilton Spectator. They posted the opinion column, and what this article is suggesting that why don't they have the Bulldogs split their time between Brantford and Hamilton? So it'd be the Bulldogs, but they would represent the region, is the idea of this article. I'm not I don't think this would ever work out because I think there's a lot of question marks involving this, but this is what the article is suggesting, suggesting that once the renovations are done at the First Ontario Centre, why not have the Bulldogs play home games in both Hamilton and Brantford, and then they could represent the whole area. Personally, I don't think this would work, but the writer is suggesting that it would benefit from just drawing fans from the city of Brantford, the city of Hamilton, and all the communities surrounding it. And when you look at the map, it's only about 40 kilometers between the First Ontario Centre and the Brantford Civic Centre, but it's still a bit of a hike. And if the traffic is bad, especially downtown Hamilton, if you're coming from Brantford, that can be a little frustrating. So I don't know, it's a bit of a, I don't think it would work personally, but they do have off-ice officials who are currently working the game from Hamilton in Brantford. I was kind of surprised because I went to the first Barrie Colts game in Brantford earlier this season, and when I was up in the press box, I was quite surprised seeing that the staff, they're committed. They've got this passion. They love their Bulldogs, and they're willing to travel half an hour to 40 minutes to work these games, to follow along with the Brantford Bulldogs. And it kind of shows because of that winning culture that the Bulldogs brought with them. They've won a couple of championships in their time in Hamilton, and now that winning ways are transferring to Brantford, and the community is falling in love with the Bulldogs. And that's why I think it'd be hard. I think for this team, it's working in Brantford. It shows that it works in Brantford. The city council right now is working towards building a new 5,000 seat arena to make sure that the OHL stays in Brantford. And I think it works. Obviously, there's no doubt that there are passionate fans for junior hockey in the city of Hamilton, but the First Ontario Centre, it's too big. And that was the biggest complaint, because the atmosphere, if you were able to shrink the arena size to about 6,000, 7,000, you would have a fantastic rink with the passionate fans. But when it's over 10,000, close to 15,000 seats in that arena, I think it's even more than that. It feels like you're in a cave, and it feels empty, and you're kind of missing the passionate atmosphere, because it kind of gets drowned out by the vastness of the First Ontario Centre. Obviously, they're going to be doing the renovations. They're supposed to start soon, and we'll see what kind of changes that does. But still, I think the arena is too big. And then you factor in the news that we just had about Burlington, City Council there exploring building a new arena near the Aldershot GO station, and that is going to be a 5,000 seat arena, which is more fitting for junior hockey than the First Ontario Centre. So I personally don't think this would work, having the Bulldogs play out of both Hamilton and Brantford. You could keep the Bulldogs in Brantford and then maybe have an expansion team or a relocation back to the First Ontario Centre in the future, or this team in Burlington, or the rink rather in Burlington, I think could work. I think that idea is probably more fitting for junior hockey than what's happening with the First Ontario Centre. But I don't go to Bulldogs games regularly. I only go there typically when the Barrie Colts are in town. So I would love to hear your opinions on this, because I think the Brantford community has shown that they deserve OHL hockey, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Bulldogs stay in Brantford past the 3-year agreement. And we'll see what happens next. And yesterday was also asked, a person asked me at the game last night, how do you fix the East Division? Because the Barrie Colts last night, they were playing the Ottawa 67s. And when you look at the East, you've got Ottawa and Kingston. They're kind of out in Eastern Ontario by their lonesome. There's been a void that was created when the Belleville Bulls moved to Hamilton. Used to be, if you went on the Eastern road trip, you'd make a stop in Belleville Friday night, go to Ottawa Saturday, Kingston on Sunday. That was typically what it was like back in the day. Now you go to Peterborough Thursday night, you go to Kingston Friday, and then Ottawa Sunday. That seems to be the trend right now with the schedule. But this person asked me last night, what about the Gatineau Olympique? Could they move into the OHL? Right away, my thought was no. There's no way the Olympique would move into the OHL. But uh, the point that this person made was that there's only 12 kilometers separating TD Place with the arena that the Gatineau Olympique play out of. I think it's the Slush Puppy Center in Gatineau. So I think it's a fascinating idea. It would solve some travel for the Olympique and also for the Ottawa 67s. They have played regular season games in the past. They've had the cross-border games. Typically, it's like 2 games a season. You'd have Ottawa go across into Gatineau and then Gatineau into Ottawa. That didn't happen this season, to my knowledge. I think it happened last year was the last time. So they have had that past, but I think it'd be interesting because that would help the travel for the Ottawa 67s, who have one of the more difficult travel schedules. And I'll get to the numbers a little bit later on, but it would help their travel. It would probably help Kingston. It would help Peterborough to an extent, maybe Oshawa. But the big problem right now in this division is the fact that the Bulldogs are all the way down in Brantford, which are closer to teams in the Western Conference than teams in the East. So I know there's been questions about will there ever be a change in the divisions, maybe restructuring the Ontario Hockey League's playoff or divisional matchups, so to speak. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think the natural fit, rather than moving Gatineau into the East Division, would be Cornwall, bringing the Cornwall Royals back. I don't think they'd be able to use that name because the Victoria Royals are in the Western Hockey League, but still, I think getting Cornwall to join the OHL circuit would solve some of the travel issues, and then you can move the Bulldogs to the Central Division or the Western Conference. I don't know how they would do it, but I think that's probably more likely than having the Gatineau Olympic join the OHL, though it would be a great rivalry if Gatineau and Ottawa could meet 6 or 8 times a season. And then imagine if those 2 teams ended up playing in the playoffs. Just the passion of those 2 franchises, and they'd be 12 kilometers apart. That'd be huge. But I wanted to break it down looking at Ottawa's travel schedule. The next closest rink for them in their division is Kingston. That's 196 kilometers away from TD Place. And then the Peterborough Memorial Center, that's a 296 kilometer drive. 346 kilometers to Oshawa, and Brantford, that's the tough one, 508 kilometers to your division rival, the Bulldogs. But saying that, those sound like big numbers. That's a lot of bus hours. You have to figure the longest part might be traveling through Toronto, although OHL teams typically travel on the 407 to bypass the 401 mayhem in the city of Toronto. But the Sioux Greyhounds, obviously, they have the harder travel schedule. When you look at the West Division, for the Greyhounds, 399 kilometers to Saginaw is their closest division rival. After that, it's 460 kilometers to Flint, 572 to Windsor, and 575 to Sarnia. So, yes, the Ottawa 67's travel schedule is a bit of a tricky one, but you look at the Sioux, and they've got the hardest schedule. And I know a lot of people like to lump Sault Ste. Marie with Sudbury, North Bay, Barrie, Owen Sound as a possible division, but that would never work either because the Chichimon, the ferry doesn't run during the winter. So you're driving around Georgian Bay and whatnot to get to Owen Sound. That is a long bus ride. I know that Sault Ste. Marie and Owen Sound are already in the same conference, but they only play each other once in Owen Sound and then once in Sault Ste. Marie because of the travel headache. And because of that adjustment, then Sault Ste. Marie is able to play more games against Sudbury and North Bay. So I know the schedule makers, they have it all figured out. They've got it all with the math. And then with the distance too, like for Ottawa to travel, they'd make a road trip where they'd stop. Well, they were in Barrie last night. Next, they're going to be in Brantford. So they kind of pair cities together on the road trip. So it's not a lot of one-offs. You'll get a couple of one-offs, but that's to maybe Oshawa, Peterborough, maybe to Mississauga as a one-off for the Ottawa 67s. But the schedule makers try to have it. It's not a balanced schedule. But I just wanted to talk about it because that question was raised last night. And I wanted to see your thoughts. What do you think about Gatineau joining the OHL? Obviously, that would have a big factor in the QMJHL because then what do you do about Val-d'Or and Rouyn-Noranda? They're on the outskirts of Western Quebec. Travel in the Quebec League, a lot tougher than the OHL and even the Western Hockey League. Their travel schedule is even worse as they go across the entire prairies all the way to the West Coast from Brandon, Manitoba. So OHLers, they kind of have it a little easier than the other CHL franchises. But still, fascinating concept. I just wanted to bring it up because it was a question that was raised. If you have any questions, you can always send me an email from the booth with mike@gmail.com. And if you have an idea to talk about, I'll look into it and maybe we can make a video out of it. So again, thank you for tuning in. Love to see the feedback. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you again soon.